Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Bill has to sit because he's really tall and I'm really short. So this way we're almost eye level. The next piece is by William Anderson, and it is based on Juna Barnes. And the remarkable thing about the three composers that were three authors, I should say, that we're presenting this evening is that they all knew each other. And tell us something about Juna Barnes. She's probably the least known of the three.
I'm very proud of helping put Juna Barnes on the map, although people know and love her very well. Her great novel is Nightwood, and T.S. Eliot edited it and made sure it got published. A lot of her poetry was published in The Dial, and to get into The Dial, I think you had to go through Ezra Pound. I think he was the editor when she had these her poems published in The Dial. The Pastoral, the final poem, is from The Dial. Juna Barnes was very close to James Joyce. She had a privileged relationship with him. Among all of the expats in Paris, she warmed up to him particularly well, and she liked to play a little trick on Gertrude Stein, promising to bring him and then falling through and failing to bring him to Gertrude Stein's house and making Gertrude look like an idiot. And apparently James Joyce gave Juna Barnes a rough draft of Ulysses. Then there's talk of Ulysses influencing Juna Barnes' Nightwood, but moreover, some people think Juna Barnes influenced Finnegan's Wake. So these people, Ezra Pound was all over. He'd like to have his fingers in everything, and I'm right now reading a book of letters between Pound and Joyce, where Pound gives his advice to Joyce about different things in the book as it evolves and emerges and comes into being. And it's a really fascinating book, Pound-Joyce letters. I don't think that Joyce really needed his help, but Pound was always mixed up with everything.
The other thing that's interesting about this piece is that it uses the two guitars plus an instrument that many people may not recognize, and I wonder if we could have a look at it. Anybody know what that is? It's a theorbo. Yes. Tell us something. A theorbo is not an instrument generally associated with contemporary music. So tell us a bit about your use of it.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity for me to talk about the theorbo. So, I'm a theorbo pioneer in contemporary music, and I'm making it a contemporary music instrument. And in the third song, I pull out the theorbo for crystals, and crystals takes place in a grotto where it's very dry, where it's a tomb, and there's this dead princess poem going on. There's a dead princess there. You know, I have an app where you can see all of the words to these songs, and I can give you the address. But we didn't choose to do super titles on this evening, and so we really think of this as pure music. But the Dead Princess poem, think of it like Pavane for a Dead Princess by Ravel, or Pelléas et Mélisande about a sick, or Parsifal about a sick woman in a sick kingdom It's all very fascinating. And the preceding song, before the theorbo song, there's this sprite, this nymph that is setting a town on fire with her energy. And I really think that Crystals is looking back on that figure from the future after she's dead. So the poetry is really, really fascinating. She didn't like to stay in the mold of Ezra Pound and follow his prescriptions. She liked to defy him. So she can be an imagist like Ezra Pound, but then she sort of wipes it away with some kind of editorializing or some kind of metaphor that is not at all what imagism is about. So she was defiant to the end.
And the interesting thing is, as you say, looking back, and of course the theorbo is a Renaissance instrument, so how appropriate. Well, I'm going to leave the stage, and I'd like you to welcome Elizabeth Farnum, who's going to sing this. So now we come to one of the most unusual operas of all, by Ezra Pound, by way of Georges Antheil, by way of Frank Brickell. And Bill, tell us a little bit about the origin of this work.
Yes, so this opera was performed in San Francisco in '71, and people out there published it, we were in touch with Olga Rudge and Ezra Pound's daughter, who's in her 90s now, and she knows about this performance, and everyone out there is very excited about it. Cygnus first got mixed up with this when we did a concert at the Morgan Library. We did the first movement, and I fell in love with it, and the Cygnus players also really loved it. It's very magical, I think, and we decided we wanted more. We wanted to do the whole thing, and so the person who arranged that for the concert at the Morgan Library in 2015 was Frank Brickell, and he's an old friend of Cygnus and a fabulous composer. We asked him to do the whole opera, and he didn't. But he got started on it, and we're putting a big dent in it now, so we have a nice chunk of it now. And I'm just delighted that we made some progress, and eventually there'll be a Cygnus version of the whole opera. I'm just going to mention the second song has the famous line, Et où est les neiges d'antan, and where are the snows of yesteryear? Rossetti made a famous translation of it, which put Villon on the map. This criminal poet. I wish I knew more about this opera, but I'm just going to tell you that it ends with Villon he killed a priest, but he wrote this great poetry. And this end of this opera, there are all the characters in the opera are hanging from ropes, and he's saying goodbye to humanity.
The other thing is that the language is not contemporary French. The language is medieval French, and some of the music is rather plain chant, isn't it? Based on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ezra Pound is famous for his epithet, "Make it new." He liked to take old things and make it new, and Frank Brickell and I are both very much neo-pre-Raphaelites, and Ezra Pound was a real pre-Raphaelite. And the impulse behind his making this opera was part of that pre-Raphaelite impulse, which is not as backward-looking as you might think, because the pre-Raphaelites considered the high Middle Ages as being the moment when Europe achieved its authentic culture, having set itself apart from classical antiquity. And that's a big deal. So pre-Raphaelitism, you see it all over New York in the Tudor architecture, Tudor Village, these kind of things, and in Scarsdale, all those Tudor buildings by the train stations. It was really big. We're no longer conscious of it, but there was an arts and crafts and sort of pre-Raphaelite revival in the early part of this century. You see it in some theaters, TV sets and things like, lots of them. Lots of TV sets have this beautiful arts and crafts decor.
And we see it in this piece.